In this episode of Satansplain, we'll hear a 2019 interview of mine with an atheism podcast, as well as talk about applying for active membership in the Church of Satan, and a satanic anecdote about some Satanists who made some 1980s satanic panic outrage work in their favor.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Once in a while on Satansplain, I will include a recording of some interview I've done in the past. In the second half of this show, you'll hear an interview I gave in 2019 for an atheism podcast. I have a few things to say about Satanism interviews in general and recording them. Before we get to all of that, let me read some listener mail. Matthew writes, what, if any, advice would you give to someone considering applying for active membership in the Church of Satan? I have been a member for almost a year, and I am interested in the possibility of meeting fellow Satanists in my area. I am aware that active members are under no obligation to meet or speak to me. Understanding that, I would like to present myself in the best light possible should the opportunity arise. So I wrote back to Matthew and I said, I really don't have much advice beyond these 3 points. 1, write as clearly and as well as you can. 2, be honest. And 3, be patient. I think these first 2 points kind of speak for themselves. However, I want to take a moment to rant about the quality of writing. I run into people, and this isn't a slam against Matthew who wrote to me. I'm just talking about in general, I once in a while, I run into people who, even outside of the whole context of active membership applications, are just really, really terrible writers. I even run into people like this at work, at the professional level. And I just think it's ridiculous. Now, I do know there are people who have some legitimate struggles with writing. Maybe English isn't their first language, or they have dyslexia or something like that. I get that. But even then, I've seen people like that typically try to do their best. And, they want to improve. So I'm not talking about that. I'm also not talking about dialogue where some things come out as sentence fragments. Even transcripts of Satansplain have some sentence fragments here and there, sure. Like this one I'm speaking now, for example. No, I'm talking about writing. I'm talking about certain adults whose writing skills are so poor, I almost want to pull them aside and ask them, when was the last time you saw the inside of a book? I'm guessing it's been a while, because if you opened one, you'd see how there are these things called punctuation marks, and how a typical sentence, ends with a thing called a period, or full stop if you're in the UK. A dot, not a string of 5 commas in a row. And this is shit I see typed from native English speakers too. Not just from the United States, but the UK, Australia, Canada, or, everywhere else. Just shitty writing. Some of these people just get cocky about it, though. They'll say, well, who cares, Bill? Fuck spelling, fuck grammar. It's just Facebook. It's just Twitter. LOL. Okay, to which I say, well, you should give a fuck about the quality of your writing, at least to some extent, right? It's one thing to make typos. We all make typos now and then. It's not about being perfect either. But if you're typing something online for the world to see, or just typing something for one other person to see, well, obviously you care to communicate something, or else you wouldn't write it. In which case, isn't it in your best interest to be clear, to not come off as lazy or an idiot? Come on. Satanism is ultimately all about self-interest. So, now consider writing a letter for something like a job interview, or in this case, application for active membership in the Church of Satan. You're not sending a quick text message to a friend. You're filling out an application. Now, I'm not saying we automatically reject Church of Satan applications if it has a typo in it, but, if we get an application that looks like it was written by somebody in kindergarten, well, that does tell us a lot about you, doesn't it? If you're serious enough to want to join the Church of Satan, surely you can write something that can be taken seriously. Now, the other two things I said with regards to active membership application is be truthful and be patient. Be truthful because if you feel like you have to lie about yourself, then I would say this organization isn't for you. In fact, that probably goes with any organization or a job interview or anything. It's one thing to use a little deception, a little lesser magic in your favor. So you're at a job interview, you find out beforehand the person interviewing you for this job really loves Paris, let's say. And so you wear a necktie with little Eiffel Towers on it to help sway that person's mind, even if you yourself couldn't care less about French things. So, that kind of manipulation in Satanism is fine. That's lesser magic. But if you really, really aren't a fit for that job and wouldn't really enjoy it or, be all of that productive in it, because at the end of the day, it just isn't you, well, then you should probably look elsewhere. And the same with the Church of Satan. If you have beliefs that are counter to Satanism on a fundamental level, then at least have the honesty to not call yourself a Satanist, let alone try to file for active membership in the Church of Satan. If you have to be somebody other than yourself, then I don't see the point. And again, I'm just generally speaking here. I'm not accusing this listener who wrote in of being a fraud or something. But finally, point 3 that I gave was to be patient. It can take a while for active memberships to process. In the meantime, if you do want to meet other Satanists in your area, I know I gave some advice in a recent episode about that. Making yourself known to other Satanists online is a good start. Well, I've got a satanic anecdote here from Church of Satan Warlock Milden. He sent this to me a while back, and I said I would get around to including it eventually. In fact, I think he posted it online. Maybe it was on X and Facebook, and somebody said, hey, you should totally send this to Satansplain for a satanic anecdote. So let's hear this satanic anecdote. Cue the Satanecdote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanecdotes.
Warlock Milden writes, there is a local horror cafe that commonly hosts live music, movie screenings, and other events for the alternative scene in my town. I went to watch showings of the original Frankenstein and Bram Stoker's Dracula. After the screening, I had a catch-up with the owner, during which he detailed the following story. When he was in his late teens, his punk band got some complaints printed in the local newspapers for supposedly being, quote, drug addicts, Satanists, and perverts. That's what mothers were saying, angry that their children were wearing merchandise from such a band. Well, this negativity and outrage garnered the band some attention, and this was towards the end of the 1980s Satanic Panic. When interviewed about the complaints, the man said that, yes, he was a Satanist and was even a card-carrying member of the Church of Satan. All of this local attention actually enabled them the opportunity to open for a fairly famous UK punk band. Well, it turns out that the complaints from those so-called mothers were actually written by him and his drummer. They used fake names, fake photos, and fake email addresses to intentionally stir up controversy and get some much-needed attention. And it worked like a charm. Warlock Milden closes by saying, if that's not utilizing lesser magic and past orthodoxies, I don't know what is. He told me that he was indeed a COS member, so that much certainly wasn't a lie. By the way, notice in that satanic anecdote there, the band didn't have to misrepresent Satanism at all. in order to get their point. They just, portrayed crazy Christians and what they would say. So thank you again for that, Warlock. And now moving on with Satansplain. In the second half of the show, I have a 2019 interview I did, which I'd like to share with you. But a few things I have to say about interviews in general. Speaking as a Satanist and a representative of the Church of Satan, I've done a lot of interviews over the years. And one thing I have done whenever I could is to make my own recording of the interview. This is something I urge other Church of Satan members do if they're ever interviewed. It's actually something I suggest anybody do if they're interviewed by anybody. Now, obviously, the person or station interviewing you is going to be making their own recording of the interview, but I can't tell you how many times a Church of Satan member has been interviewed only to have a lot of that interview never used. Sometimes that's because of time constraints. So, if you're doing an interview and it ends up being 40 minutes long, but the radio or TV show you're doing, it can only be 30 minutes long, including all the commercial breaks, well, then, yeah, they may end up leaving out over half of the interview in those cases, sure. But there have also been times when myself or another Satanist have been interviewed and the interview never sees the light of day. Maybe the network decides they don't want to run the story. Maybe they were hoping that an interview with a Satanist would include stories about drinking goat's blood and sacrificing babies and so on, and they're disappointed when they learn that that's not what Satanism is. Maybe they talk to us and we make too much sense to them. They can't find enough they disagree with. But they can't bring themselves to publish something that makes them look like they agree with Satanists. So the interview never airs. And this happens, by the way, at all levels in the Church of Satan. I remember our own high priest, Magus Peter H. Gilmore, was interviewed for Penn and Teller's TV show, Bullshit, and was even in the description of that episode as it was printed on the DVD. But his interview was completely left out. And I have actually met Penn and Teller in person several times. Penn knows Radio Free Satan because we had him interviewed on a show we used to have on there years ago. But I asked each of them directly about that incident with the Church of Satan being cut from there. And they said, they don't really remember why that part was removed. Maybe it was time constraints. Okay, it still seems weird to me that, we would make it to the description on the DVD case, but not in the interview. Oh, well. But Magus Gilmore was also interviewed by Bill Maher for the documentary Religulous, I think it was called. And I guess Bill Maher was unable to try to spin it his way, so the Church of Satan part was completely cut out of the movie. The guy who did the heavy metal documentary, A Headbanger's Journey, Sam, I don't know, I can't remember his name, but that guy, he was doing some documentary on the devil, and he got 2 or 3 days of the high priest and high priestess to interview them. They gave him his time, and he didn't end up using any of the footage. So it's so ridiculous. But what's sometimes even more annoying is when they'll interview one of us and they'll use some of the interview, but then they'll leave out the context of a lot of things or chop it up and put it in different orders and mix it in with other people they've interviewed, who may be devil worshippers they've found on social media. And they think, we have this person from the Church of Satan, the actual organization that's been around for over half a century, and had the Satanic Bible and everything. But, for balance, let's also hear from Damian Von Crowley the Seventh, who runs a TikTok channel called The Mosque of Lucifer, which was created 4 months ago. So, yeah, regardless, going back to my original point, this is why I make my own recordings of interviews that I do. Sometimes it's not the best audio quality, but it's certainly better than nothing. Especially if I think the interviewer, if I think the interview went well and they decide not to air it or they chop it up, at least I have a recording of it. In fact, when I first started Satansplain, some of you listeners might remember that one of my very first episodes was the uncut version of an interview I gave for a podcast. I thought the interview went well, but then the interviewer ended up portraying the Church of Satan as theistic instead of atheistic, despite everything I said, and a bunch of other, ridiculous mischaracterizations of Satanism. So I was happy to air my own uncut recording on my own show. And I think that was episode number 2 of Satansplain. Well, anyway, back in 2019, there was a Satanist who was part of this atheist group called the Atheist Underground. And he really, really wanted me to be a part of this. He said, "Magister Bill, I think you're great at writing and explaining things online, and I think you could help with this." So I finally joined this little online group. They were making an atheism podcast at the time, too, and they wanted to do an episode eventually on Satanism. Now, granted, we've seen other atheist shows over the years try to interview Satanists, but not as fellow atheists to learn about this non-theistic religion of Satanism and what it's really about. No, I've seen atheists more often than not try to invite Satanists on just to debate us like any other religion they try to debate. Despite the fact we're both atheists, they don't care about that. They see, okay, you are a religion, well, then you're the enemy, and that's that. Fortunately, though, that was not the case with the Atheist Underground. Regardless, Atheist Underground interviewed me in 2019, and I thought the final episode was kind of lame in its final edited format. It was still nowhere nearly as bad as, the other interview I mentioned. But my interview was cut up and moved around and put in with some other people. So we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, you'll hear the recording I made of that interview. Stay tuned. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
Do satanic cults lurk in the shadows? Can memories of satanic ritual abuse be repressed? Do exorcisms really drive out demons? And are those demons always possessing Zach Baggins? I'm JD Sword, the Satanic Skeptic. Join me on The Devil in the Details as I examine these questions and more, bringing a skeptical and satanic perspective to the paranormal. The Devil in the Details, available on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and more.
Have you ever used a public toilet and noticed one of those dirty poems scrawled on the wall? Aren't they great? If you thought that sick shit was funny, you're gonna love this book series, Poems from the Bathroom Wall. These original poems are written in the same style and cover the same subject matter. Look these books up on lulu.com, that's LULU.com, and make sure that your filters are set to allow explicit content. Poems from the Bathroom Wall. Indulgence for the lowbrow connoisseur.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you are on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, or whatever the equivalent is, on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. For all questions and correspondence, email me directly. bill@satansplain.com is the email address. And if you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to satansplain.locals.com. You can also get the Locals app for your mobile device and look up Satansplain on there. But you can sign up for Locals for free. Additionally, you can become a paid subscriber there and support Satansplain. Become a paid subscriber to Satansplain. We have a merch store as well. In addition to all of that, you can go to store.satansplain.com. And thank you, as always, to all of you who support the show in one way or another. And now the 2019 interview from Atheist Underground. A couple of last things I want to mention before I play this. First of all, like a lot of interviews I've done, there are lots of the same basic questions that come up, the Satanism 101 questions, if you will, what our basic beliefs are and so on. So I realize that to most of you listeners, to most of you, that stuff will be stuff you already know. In fact, in this interview, you'll hear me give an answer that's a variation of the Satansplain introduction recording, and what Satanism is and isn't. I'd like to think of Satansplain as a show that goes beyond the Satanism 101 stuff, but I also realize we do have some listeners now and then who are new to learning about Satanism, so sometimes the basics are worth going over. Now, as for this particular interview, you'll hear the interviewer was recording me on Skype, and at the time, Skype had some weird interference problems where occasionally you'd hear some loud static or voices dropping out. So I was warned that I might have to repeat some lines, and then they would edit that out in post-production. Fine. It happens. I also mentioned that degree 5 in the Church of Satan hierarchy is Magus. To be more specific, it is actually Magus or Maga, depending on male or female. And if you want more information on that, including addressing the stupid conspiracy theory related to that, see Satansplain episode number 36. But as you listen to this 2019 interview, I want you to do the following. I want you to notice certain assumptions that the interviewer keeps making. He keeps assuming, for example, that because I'm an atheist, that I not only see Christian theocracy as being a huge threat, but that it's some sort of political priority for me. He likewise assumes that the Church of Satan as an organization should be fighting this almost in the same sort of way that the American Civil Liberties Union or Freedom from Religion Foundation or similar secular organizations do. In fact, in general, he seems to be phrasing a lot of his questions in terms of collectives. So listen for that. He asks, for example, what the Church of Satan is doing, collectively as an organization to fight this battle he wants to see fought. I pointed out that this doesn't really work in the context of Satanism. I explain how Satanism is a personal tool, not a collective cause. One thing I should have added is that having a cause get public support from Satanism or the Church of Satan would not help said cause. That's something I covered a couple recent episodes of Satansplain, a couple episodes back. But he outright asks if I feel oppressed, which I almost had to laugh at. So here is the 2019 interview for Atheist Underground, and I'm just going to say goodbye now and let this play for the rest of the episode. Thank you all for listening. Hail Satan.
But we are going to try to keep this short. I talked to a Satanist, Church of Satan guy, a guy who describes himself as a LaVeyan Satanist in Australia. And I think we've all been around a little bit. We're kind of familiar with the philosophy. So I guess what I want to get at is what the Church of Satan is doing these days. What how the hierarchy works a little bit. What your role is.
Sure.
What and how you fit into the modern scene, the political scene, the secular movement kind of awakening globally. So I'll give you a little introduction here.
Okay.
We're with Magister Bill M. himself, joining us from the East Coast somewhere. Where are you?
I'm right around Boston.
He's in the New England area, and Patriots taking care of business today with the Bengals.
I don't know. I'm not a sports fan. I don't pay any attention to that.
Yeah, I find that a lot of folks who do what we do don't really. Sunday afternoon is always good because nobody's watching football.
If I hear a lot of car horns outside my window, it probably means they won or something. So.
There you go. We got more important things to take care of, I think, in society. And from our perspective as atheists, trying to wrest control of the government from Christian nationalists who would impose their filthy and personal morality and questionable morality upon the rest of us who aren't really all that interested in evangelical Christianity. And well known to most of us, if you went through college at some point, especially in the 80s, I think you read or at least came across the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, and that became a whole thing. And as we've watched over the years, it's occurred to us that Satanism is just atheism with a great gimmick attached. So we're doing a whole show devoted to Satanism. You can tell us in your own words what Church of Satan means to you. What is it working towards, and what is your part in it these days?
Well, I wouldn't say Satanism is atheism with something attached to it. It's sort of like calling Christianity monotheism with something attached to it. Atheism is certainly one aspect of Satanism. So it is Satanism. We're not Satan worshippers. We're Satanists. And Satanism is a non-theistic religion, a carnal religion rather than spiritual. And we embrace a lot of the life-enriching things that have traditionally been given the devil's name, like pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, passion for living, being selective about whom you love. We don't see these things as shameful sins, as a lot of spiritual religions have traditionally called them, but we see them as empowering ideals. We also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Now, how does the hierarchy of the church itself work? Are you a magister? How do you come to be that? Is it a national organization? Is it each state? How does it work?
We're an international organization, and we're very clear that you don't have to join the Church of Satan to be a Satanist. All you have to do is read the Satanic Bible and come to the conclusion that this is something for you. It's something that's certainly not for everybody. But the hierarchy is all based on sort of an honorary system. It's not an initiatory thing. You don't take tests or study, clerical things and, become a higher rank through that.
No seminary?
Yeah, no, there's none of that. It's given out just based off of how well the organization sees you doing in life and how well you're representing Satanism. How well can you explain that to people? So we have registered membership, and then we have active membership above that. For active membership is application to make sure, you're kind of on the same page with us. And then up from there, the degrees are witch or warlock, depending on male or female. Priest, priestess above that. Magister, magistra above that. And magus is degree 5. Pretty much only the high priest is that. We do have the high priest and a high priestess as well.
Now, where are those guys at?
Well, they are at the headquarters, and right now that's in Poughkeepsie, New York. And it's been helpful having 2 people run the organization. Our high priest, Magus, Peter H. Gilmore, does a lot of the representation for big media and things outside. And our high priestess is doing a lot of things internally, helping to run the organization, and it's worked out really well.
Now, what made you become interested in this? You weren't raised a Satanist, I'm guessing?
No, I think like a lot of atheists, and like a lot of American atheists, I was raised in a Christian home. I was raised in a Catholic home in a very Jewish neighborhood, actually. And I also had a friend who was from a Hindu family, so I certainly knew from a young age that Christianity wasn't the only option out there. I became disillusioned with Christianity sometime when I was in my teens. I didn't become an atheist yet, though. I researched, I tried finding new religions, was into some occult dabbling and Wicca, then moved on to Buddhism or Eastern religions, dabbling with different things. Eventually, I did come to be an atheist, as I found God to be an unnecessary way to look at the universe. It just seemed like a needless personification. And it wasn't until I moved out to college I reread Satanic Bible. I came across it briefly as a rebellious teen, didn't really read it as an adult, but read it as an adult and found that it really matched, the truth as I saw it and matched my worldview. Gave me a framework which I could use to model the world and considered that to be my religion. I've been in the Church of Satan now for about 20 years.
Now, the Church of Satan is a recognized religion, yes?
Yeah, it is. I remember there was an Army chaplain's handbook even that had entries for the Church of Satan. It's, legally recognized as such.
Now, what is it? Does the church have a mission? Does it see itself in terms of larger social efforts in any kind of way? What does the church really do besides, a place in a philosophy for like-minded folk to gather around?
Well, there's not really much more to do for that, because Satanism as a religion is very self-centered, shamelessly self-centered religion. So we're not ecumenical. We're not out lobbying for things. If an individual Satanist wants to do that, finds, say, a political cause or some kind of social cause or charity, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Satanists deciding to do that if they feel that's in their own best interests. But there's certainly no obligation for members to do things to, so-called better society or something like that, because that just doesn't make any sense in Satanism.
Is there any active component, like we in the atheist movement are upset that we're seeing our country overrun and seemingly by Christian politicians? Is there any, or are Satanists largely apathetic about that, or is there?
Well, there was certainly
some kind of effort afoot to keep this from turning into the Christian nation they want it to be.
Well, there's certainly some individual Satanists who are into that, and those individual Satanists are free to join organizations that are dedicated to that, fighting that. American Civil Liberties Union, American Atheists, Atheists for Separation of Church and State. There are all those organizations that already do that. There's really no rational reason why the Church of Satan, as an administrative organization, should lobby. Because another thing is, it's not all atheists are necessarily, politically wise, fighting against Christian theocracy as their number one thing. It's certainly not true that all atheists. It's certainly not true that all atheists vote Democrat, for example.
No, I get what you're saying, but I guess my point would be a fringe religion might feel oppressed in a way that makes them feel like they need to make more of a statement. Like, why does it doesn't bother Satanists that we have crosses everywhere on public property, or if the feeling is that the organization really is separate from that, then that's fine. But that's the nature of my question.
Well, sure. I'm bugged by that as much as the next atheist, but I'm not going to whine about it. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a victim as a Satanist for that. I took upon this title of Satanist knowing that it means the adversary. That's what the original root of Satan is. And it doesn't really make much sense to fight for social inclusion of an explicitly adversarial religion. That's just inherently contradictory. But if I do see things that, are in violation of separation of church and state, then I can, just as an individual who's upset by that, can take action against that. I don't see why I need the organization to do that. Again, when there are so many others that are dedicated to that. The role of the Church of Satan... Sorry, what's that?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the role of the Church of Satan is really an administrative thing. It's have a central place to go to for information for people who agreed with this religion, and, to find out more about it, to network with other people. Then that's how you were able to find me for this interview, through the Church of Satan.
Right. Yeah, I got it. How about charity work or things that other sorts of churches might more traditionally get involved in? Again, is it so individually oriented that there's not much of an effort in that regard?
Correct. It should be up to the individual to go decide which charity, if any, is in his or her best interest to do. I don't know why on earth we would expect the Church of Satan to go as an organization to do that. Would we expect them to take money from other people, other Satanists who may not agree with a particular charity, for example, and give it to somebody else? That doesn't make any sense to me.
How about the future of the religion? Is it not really a concern again? You obviously don't proselytize or do missionary work to convert people.
No, because that is contradictory to Satanism. This should be a religion we think that should come natural to you. You can't really indoctrinate somebody into Satanism. Like I said, it's not for everybody, and it is an explicitly adversarial religion. We took on the name of mythology's most notorious bad guy for a number of good reasons. And some of the reasons I explained earlier. I see the Church of Satan just continuing as it has been when new technologies come through. I'm sure we'll utilize them just as we've utilized the internet, for example. So we'll be available. We're not going away. And people should still be able to find us when they identify as Satanists.
Yeah, you don't feel necessarily as an individual Satanist that you're persecuted in your...
No, I don't think I'm persecuted.
Wear the hail.
No, I don't think
Satan shirts on planes and stuff. That's kind of disturbing.
No, I think that was a really stupid move on somebody trying to go, create controversy where none exists. I read that little story, assuming it's true. I think was it American Airlines? I think it was them. Yeah. I think they were wrong to try to tell somebody what to, wear on a plane. That was stupid. But I think it was also stupid on the person's part to trying to wear things publicly where it could cause some commotion and trouble. There's nothing satanic at all about being a martyr. I mean, martyrdom goes right against, Satanism. There's no shame in being quiet about your, religion. I don't wear my pentagram necklaces out in the office, first and foremost, because I don't think religion or politics should have any role in the workplace. And it's not really anybody's business. And so, no, I don't consider myself a victim. It would be kind of silly if I took on the name Satanist, which it's a very emotional charged word, and be shocked if, it gets a negative reaction. That's just silly.
Now say the sentence again about there's no Satanism in being a martyr that you started with because the interference came.
Okay. There's absolutely nothing. Okay. There's nothing satanic about being a martyr.
Perfect. Yeah, that's good stuff. I really appreciate how concise you are. I mean, your voice sounds really good.
Maybe you can swap that around to make the full sentence out of it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'll do.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I edit these really highly. I'll call out the. That's why I appreciate how you can get right to the point, and it's going to make it easy because some of these things end up going, as you know, I guess, if you interview people, you have 50 minutes of stuff to edit down and try to get pertinent information out. So, do you know anything? And if you don't, this is fine. You don't even have to answer. But nobody from the Satanic Temple would get back to me. What is the difference? And maybe some of the listeners are confused about that.
Well, we have similar names, I know, and there have been a lot of so-called satanic organizations over the decades that have had other really similar names. I remember another group trying to call itself First Church of Satan. There was another one called the First Satanic Church, both which came out after the Church of Satan, so go figure. Church of Lucifer, Mosque of Belial, whatever. But the Satanic Temple, they're a political organization that came out a few years ago. And as far as I can tell, they're not Satanists. They're a political group of atheists who throw on cloaks and show up in public to piss off Christians, namely by trying to play the game of, well, if you Christians are going to do this thing of yours in public and put this monument in a park or do this thing in a school, then we're going to do the satanic parody of that. And I think that just doesn't make any sense on so many levels. Putting the collective above the individual, as I mentioned earlier, that's about as unsatanic as it gets. And never mind an adversarial that wants social inclusion, that doesn't really make any sense either. And also, as I said, we abhor the victim mentality. But it seems these people from Satanic Temple jump on this persecuted minority bandwagon that's so popular with other groups these days. Now I know
they're the atheists with a gimmick. That's what I'm.
Yeah,
what I think.
That'd be much more accurate to say that. Yeah. And it's fine if you want to be an atheist and want to protest things, but I don't see why you have to use the name of an already established religion. I mean, the Church of Satan started in 1966. We were the first group in history to have a fully developed religion, an actual religion, calling itself Satanism. And I know some people will hear my complaints about the Satanic Temple and think, oh, well, this guy is just like, when a Catholic says Protestants aren't the real Christians, or a Protestant says Mormons aren't real Christians. And no, that's not analogous at all, because Protestants, Catholics, Mormons, and so on, those are all denominations of the same religion. They're all denominations of Christianity. They all, despite differences, they have the same book, they have the same deity structure, the same fundamental beliefs. They all believe in, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that it's important described in the Gospels and so on. But you can't really say the same about the Church of Satan and some other random occult group you hear in the news calling themselves Satanists. And that's a thing that journalists and readers, probably for that matter, never really stop and question. You can't just take a name of an established religion and call yourself that and throw out everything. To be a denomination of a religion, you got to have something in common. And going back to the Satanic Temple, I don't see that. We don't.
I think that they would agree that they're a political organization. I'm not sure that anybody would disagree with that, and that's really clarifies things, I think, for people who might be confused about it. I think they just, like you say, they grabbed onto the fact that Satan is something that will be evocative to Christians.
Yeah. And people have heard of Satanists. People have heard of Satanists throughout the decades. And so when you read a news piece saying, Satanists showed up and did this, and people just assume, okay, then they were Satanists. And I'd say definitely political, because here's a question nobody really asks. Does the Satanic Temple have an actual religion to present in the first place? Or are they just showing up in places with the threat of having a religion to insert? Because I haven't really seen any signs that they have a developed religion. They took the name, our name, Satanism, but they have this vague list of 7 tenets, which was made as a parody for the 10 Commandments to make it sound more reasonable to the layman. So people would say, comparing this to the 10 Commandments, I agree with this. Well, it's not really all that hard to come up with something more agreeable than the 10 Commandments. But
I wish somebody would reach out from them to explain themselves, but nobody did so far. Maybe they will before I drop this episode. But if not, we gave them a chance to talk about what they were about.
Their high priest, Brian Werner, I think his name was, quit the organization when he realized that it was really just a political organization and that you don't even have to identify as a Satanist to join them. And so he said, all right, I really want nothing to do with this then if it's really nothing about Satanism, and he left.
Now, do you have anything to promote? You got a Facebook page? You got a book coming out?
I do actually have a book. I do actually have a book in the works because I've written a lot of essays over the years, published in various places. I have a bunch that are on churchofsatan.com. You can read some of my essays there. But I've been meaning to compile all of them into a book. Still compiling. And I'm still doing my podcast I've been doing since 2003, The Devil's Mischief, devilsmischief.com. It's the URL. It's one of many podcasts that are on radiofreesatan.com. Radio Free Satan's been around since 2000, and just a bunch of Church of Satan members doing different podcasts.
Sounds good. That's all I got. Is there anything else that I didn't cover that you'd like to throw in?
Yeah, I can think of a few things. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to say, as a fellow atheist to other atheists out there, to remember that the definition of atheist is simply not believing a deity. I've seen a lot of atheists who get so wrapped up in the anti-religion thing that they almost let Christianity define all of religion for themselves, and not realizing that non-theistic religions do exist. It is possible to be an atheist who adheres to a particular religion. And I'd say also, don't be afraid to dismiss, don't be afraid of symbols and metaphor. I know some atheists have hang-ups about that because of the Christian indoctrination that they've gone through. But, it's possible you can have fun with things. You can suspend disbelief for a movie, for example. You can watch Star Wars, not believe in the Force afterwards. It's okay to have some fantasy in your life and still be an atheist. Just recognize it's fantasy. It's fiction.
That's excellent. I'll absolutely make sure I leave that point in. What else you got?
I would say I object to the use of the term LaVeyan Satanism, because we don't use that term ourselves. To us, Satanism is Satanism. And The term LaVeyan Satanism seems to have been used by journalists and a couple of clueless occultists to try to lend credibility to the idea that you can be a devil worshiper and, oh, that's a type of Satanism. And again, it's not. You can't really call all of these different things denominations of the same religion when they don't really have any dogma in common. We might have Satan as a symbol used somewhere, but that's about the only thing we might have in common with some of these other cult groups.
Okay, that's a good one. I think that guy, he's from Australia with no Church of Satan, no organization down there, and he didn't want to join. And so I think that's his way of separating himself from Satanic Temple. Maybe, I'm not sure. But that's also a good point.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean. He was trying to join in Australia because we're
no. He's not. He's
okay.
His point was that he basically echoed what you're saying. It's an individual religion, and there's no compunction to join the Church of Satan to be a Satan.
Yeah,
as long as you read the Bible and agree, and that's how you live your life and your lifestyle. He was totally. So he was just saying, I'm just conjecturing that the only reason he calls himself a LaVeyan Satanist is to identify himself with that Church of Satan philosophy and church that LaVey started, right? And then.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think that
not be a Satanic Temple.
Well, I understand that, but I think the term just adds more confusion than actually clears things up.
I don't disagree. Yeah. Cool. Anything else?
You asked earlier about what the Church of Satan is doing, and I would say the Church of Satan is made up of its members. So if you want to see what the Church of Satan is doing, you see what its members are individually doing. You can go to churchofsatan.com and see, for example, the news feed, because once in a while members decide to share the news with the Church of Satan about things they may be doing. We certainly don't share all the news about everything we're doing because sometimes we don't want to out ourselves. It might be, we may be doing something really important in our career or for something, but we don't want it to be known that we're Satanists because, we know that the problems that can bring on. We'd rather be more pragmatic, more practical about that.
Your clarity about the separating the individual from the collective is really pertinent. I'm going to make sure all of that gets in there. I really love the way that you see that. And anytime that there's a contradiction there, that's something that people aren't going to be able to delineate in their heads very as clearly as you. So I'm going to work hard to make sure that comes through. That really adds a lot to what I've gotten so far. From different people. So I appreciate appreciate your perspective.
Well, the thing is, we view Satanism as a tool rather than a cause. It is a set of principles and things you can put into practice to better your own life and to make more sense of the world, we believe. But it's not a public cause, because as I said, trying to fight for social inclusion and be adversarial at the same time, that doesn't really work.
Well, what you're articulating is really the answer to the atheist movement problem, which has been hijacked by every other special interest group that wants inclusion, and it's a natural evolution. I can see why it happened, but I'm one of those guys. I'm like, yeah, everybody deserves their own social justice. Big deal. This is about atheism. Can we talk about atheism while we're here? I feel that pain, So you expressing that. Each individual has to follow his or her own conscience and objective conclusions for their own life. And if you want to be an activist as a Satanist, then go be an activist in your feminist area where you're a Satanist feminist or whatever. So I really love that. Thank you so much for joining us. He's Magister Bill from Boston.
Thank you for having me.
You got it, man. I'll send you a link when it's up, and it'll be before Christmas, I'm sure. I'm hoping for.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at Satansplain.com. And for more information on Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode is copyright 2024, Magister Bill M.